My brother got my wife pregnant. So I disappeared without saying a single word. 4 years later, my daughter called me with a voice I barely recognized and said, "Mom never remarried. She died alone, still waiting for you to come back. Let me take you back to the beginning." Because to truly understand the depth of the betrayal, you first need to know exactly what was being betrayed. Drakehold Construction was my father's company and name on paper. His signature was on the founding documents, his photo was on the website, and every Christmas dinner ended with him telling a version of the same story about how he built it from nothing. I stopped correcting that story around year 3 when I realized nobody at that table actually wanted the accurate version. The accurate version: my father is a decent man with average business instincts who got very lucky having a son who understood contracts, client relationships, and long-game revenue development. I joined Drake at 24. By 28 I had restructured the entire bidding process. By 31 I had personally negotiated an 18-month hospital expansion contract that became the company's single largest revenue source. Municipal infrastructure bids, commercial development relationships, private investor pipelines. I built all of it, not because anyone asked me to, because I understood that the company my father kept taking credit for would have plateaued and quietly died without someone who actually knew how to grow it. My brother Lucien was the other version of the family story. He is 3 years younger, better looking by most people's measure, and has spent his entire life being the preferred one, not because he earned it, because he was easier. He smiled at the right moments. He told my parents what they wanted to hear. When he joined Drakehold at 26, he was handed a director title that came with a salary I knew was higher than mine and responsibilities that never once required him to work past 5:00 p.m. He did not develop a single client. He attended meetings I scheduled, presented proposals I wrote, and collected a paycheck funded by revenue I generated. I did not resent it the way you would expect. I just noted it, filed it, and kept working. That was probably my first mistake. I married Evelyn 5 years ago. She was a property valuation consultant, sharp, self-sufficient, did not need anything from anyone. I respected that immediately. We met at a commercial building I just closed a contract on. She was there doing evaluation assessment for a separate client. We talked for 20 minutes in a car park and I asked for her number before it even processed that I was doing it. We have a daughter, Ren. She was 11 when everything came apart. Still the best thing I have ever had anything to do with. The marriage had felt off for about a year before it ended. Not explosive, just quieter than it used to be. Less overlap. I put it down to work schedules, the natural compression that happens when two people stop making deliberate time. I was wrong about that, obviously. But at the time I believed it because it was easier and because I trusted her. That is the honest answer. Evelyn told me she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning 10 weeks along. She said it carefully, the kind of careful that should have told me something immediately but did not, because I was not looking for it yet. I did the math in real time standing in our kitchen. We had not been intimate in over 3 months. I knew that with certainty because I had noticed the distance and tried to address it twice. Both times she had deflected and I had not pushed 3 months, 10 weeks. I did not say anything. I told her that was a lot to process and I needed some air. I drove to work. I sat at my desk for about 20 minutes doing nothing. Then I called a private clinic, not our family doctor, not anyone in our shared orbit, and booked a paternity test consultation for that afternoon. The results came back 4 days later by secure email, not mine. That was the first line of the report. Clinical language, but the meaning was immediate. The second thing I noticed was a secondary notation, a genetic flag the lab includes when the biological father appears to be a close male relative of the tested male. First-degree paternal relationship. The kind of language that means one specific thing when you are an only son with one brother. I was sitting in the clinic car park. When I read it 3 times. Not because I could not believe it, because I was deciding right then, sitting in that car with that email on my phone, exactly how far I was willing to go. I drove home, made dinner, sat across from Evelyn while we ate and talked about nothing. Ren's upcoming school assessment, a problem with the hot water pressure, whether we needed to replace the guttering before winter. Normal conversation. I contributed to it normally. She had no idea I had spent the afternoon in a clinic car park rearranging the rest of my life. That night I called my lawyer at 9:00 p.m. His name is Forum. He has been my personal lawyer for 6 years, separate from Drakehold's legal team, which was important. I told him I needed divorce papers, drafted a full financial severance strategy, and a clean separation of every personal asset currently connected to my wife. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. He said he would have a preliminary structure by morning. I slept 4 hours, not badly, just efficiently. There was not much to feel yet. I was still in the part where everything is logistics. In the morning I printed the paternity results at the home office printer while Evelyn was in the shower. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. When she came downstairs, I pushed the printed page across the table toward her without saying anything. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said yes, it was Lucien. Just over a year. She was going to tell me. I let that last sentence sit in the air between us for a moment. Then I asked the only question I actually needed answered right then. Does he know? She said yes. I stood up, took the paper back, and walked out of the kitchen. I called Lucien from the hallway. He picked up on the third ring. I did not raise my voice. There was no point. And honestly, the absence of emotion in my own voice felt more accurate to what I was actually experiencing. I told him I had the test results. I had the dates. He had 24 hours before everyone who mattered found out. He started talking. I hung up. My parents were next. I want to be precise about this part because it matters for everything that comes after. What I expected from that call was some version of horror. The genuine unscripted kind you cannot fake. A parent finding out their younger son had been sleeping with their older son's wife for over a year should produce a specific kind of reaction. Immediate, visceral, unambiguous. What I got was, let us not do anything rash. My mother said it within the first 30 seconds. Too quickly, too smoothly. My father followed with family comes first, a phrase I had heard him use before, always in contexts where it meant your interests come last. Neither of them asked how I was. Neither of them expressed anything that resembled genuine shock. They were in calculation mode before I had finished the first sentence. I noted that did not address it. I said I would be in touch and ended the call. I called Rowena that afternoon. She was Lucien's fiancée, a structural auditor, methodical and precise, someone I had always privately thought was significantly too good for my brother. I sent her a text first. Call me when you are alone. She called within the hour. I gave her everything. The paternity results, 2 years of phone records between Lucien and Evelyn that I had pulled through my carrier that morning. Timestamps, duration, frequency, hotel booking confirmations I had found in Evelyn's email account before she thought to change the password. I did not editorialize. I just transferred the information cleanly, the way you would hand someone documentation they had a right to. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long time. Then Rowena said thank you. She ended the call. By the end of that day, divorce papers filed, joint accounts flagged, personal assets cleanly separated from everything attached to Evelyn or Drake. I checked into a hotel with a single bag in my laptop. That night I opened the laptop and pulled up the complete client directory for Drake Old Construction, every active contract, every key relationship, every decision maker at every firm who had agreed to work with me over the past 10 years. I went through it methodically, account by account, and I opened a new document. At the top I typed 2 words: what I own. I want to be clear about something before I explain what happened next, because people tend to read this part wrong. I did not destroy Drake out of anger. Anger is inefficient. What I did was simply stop pretending that the company's success belonged to anyone other than the person who actually built it. The morning after I filed for divorce, I called my personal lawyer, not Drake Holds, and asked one specific question. Were there any non-solicitation clauses in my employment agreement that restricted me from independently approaching clients I had personally originated? Forum reviewed the documentation and came back to me within 2 hours. The answer was no. My father had never thought to include them, and Lucien certainly had not known to add them. Nobody had ever considered the possibility that I might leave, because nobody had ever seriously considered what leaving would cost them. I spent the following 2 weeks making phone calls. I was precise about it. I did not approach every client, only the ones whose relationship existed because of me specifically. The hospital expansion, 18 months of my life, multiple board presentations, a relationship with their development director I had built across 4 years of consistent delivery, 3 municipal infrastructure accounts who returned calls because they knew my name, not Drake Holds, a private investor group that had communicated almost exclusively through me since day one, who had in fact asked on 2 separate occasions whether I had ever considered going independent. I told each of them the same thing. I was establishing a consultancy. Same service, reduced overhead, continuity guaranteed. Most did not hesitate. One of the municipal contacts said, and I am paraphrasing only slightly, honestly, we have been working with you, not the company. This does not change much. Within 3 weeks of those calls, Drake Holds' active revenue pipeline dropped by roughly 70%. The hospital contract transferred cleanly. The municipal bids followed. 2 of the private investors redirected their full working relationship to my consultancy by the end of the month. Lucien, who had spent 6 years as a director without originating a single client of his own, was now running the operations of a company that had almost nothing left to operate. Creditors started asking questions. The board, such as it was, requested an emergency review of forward projections. The forward projections were gone. Then the lawsuits arrived. It turned out that Lucien, during a board meeting 2 years earlier, had co-signed personal liability clauses on 2 sub-agreements in an attempt to appear decisive in front of investors. I remember that meeting. I remembered thinking at the time that he had not read what he was signing. He had not. When those clients transitioned away and staged payments stalled, their legal teams reviewed the paperwork and found exactly what I had suspected they would find. The first suit came from a subcontractor owed payments on a project that collapsed after the revenue drop. The second came from a private investor who had been brought in specifically on Lucien's representation of projected earnings. Projections built entirely from my pipeline, presented as if he developed them. Combined liability just over $340,000. He did not have it. He started liquidating his car first, then a property investment he had made at the height of his income. The debt restructured into a repayment arrangement that his lawyer apparently told him would follow him for the better part of a decade. Rowena left without drama, which somehow made it land harder for him. No public confrontation, just a returned engagement ring via courier, a quiet withdrawal from every shared social space, and a single post that said nothing explicitly but communicated everything to anyone paying attention. Lucien lost his director position 3 months after I walked out. The company was unraveling too fast for the title to mean anything. Anyway, my parents called twice that week. My mother said I was destroying the family. My father brought up the inheritance, what I stood to lose if I continued down this path. I told him the inheritance was backed by a company that no longer had revenue and suggested he sort that out before using it as leverage. My lease on the hotel apartment was expiring. The divorce papers came through. I signed them on a Wednesday afternoon at Forum's office, left the building and drove back to the hotel. That night I called Bastien, an old university friend who had left the city years ago and now lived on the coast 1,200 kilometers away. I said I need somewhere to land. He said, how long? I said, permanently. Bastien laughed and said he would leave the key under the mat. I did not announce that I was leaving. I did not tell Evelyn, did not call my parents, did not send a message to anyone at Drake. One morning I was there, the next I was not. I loaded my car with 2 bags and my work equipment and I drove 1,200 kilometers to a coastal town that smelled like salt and old timber, where nobody knew my name and nobody had a claim on anything I was carrying. Bastien had a spare room above a bakery he had converted into a short-term lead. I took it for 3 months while I found somewhere permanent. The consultancy ran entirely remotely, always had by design. My clients did not care where I slept. I bought a house 18 months later. Small functional faces west over the water. I run in the mornings, I cook on Sundays. I sleep without interruption. The hardest part of leaving was not Evelyn. It was not my parents or Lucien or the wreckage of everything I had built at Drake. It was Ren. She was 11, old enough to understand that her father had gone somewhere and was not coming back. Not old enough to understand the full architecture of why. I arranged a financial trust through Forum, school fees, medical, a living stipend routed through Evelyn without commentary. She would never lack for anything I could provide materially. That part was non-negotiable and I handled it before I started the car. I wrote Ren one letter, told her I loved her, that none of what happened was her fault, and that when she was older I hoped the shape of it would make more sense to her than it could right now. I did not include a return address. I instructed Forum to pass my personal phone number to Ren's school registrar only for genuine emergencies and to no one else. Then I let the silence build. Back home, from what Forum relayed in his brief factual updates, the situation continued deteriorating without requiring any further effort from me. Lucien settled the subcontractor lawsuit 14 months after I left, liquidated the Hargray Street property to cover it. 4 months after that, Forum sent a second email. Investor suit resolved. Payment plan likely 6 to 7 years. I read both. Did not reply to either. Lucien abandoned Evelyn around the same time the second lawsuit settled. The money was gone and apparently so was his interest in the situation he had created. He surfaced with a new partner within the year. The boy Evelyn's son, his son was barely 2 years old. I learned the child existed through Forum. I did not ask for further details. Evelyn's world contracted. My parents, who had spent 18 months calling her to preserve the family, redirected their blame entirely once the company's collapse became undeniable. Old friends drifted. She was working property valuations again at a fraction of her previous income, raising 2 children without consistent support from anyone who had promised it. The first letter arrived at Forum's office 6 months after I left. He scanned the envelope and emailed me. Letter from Evelyn, instruction. I typed back, hold it. Do not open it. Do not forward anymore. Just log them. The confirmations arrived after that like a quiet record of her persistence. Monthly at first, then around birthdays, then holidays, Christmas. Each one a single line from Forum. Another letter logged. I never asked for them to stop. I also never asked what any of them said. 4 years passed. My consultancy grew to 5 contractors operating under my name. I have a doctor I trust, a cafe 2 streets from my house where they start my order when they see me come through the door, and a small number of people whose company I actually want. I am not unhappy. That is not a small thing. It took deliberate construction the same way everything else in my life worth having did. Then one evening my personal phone rang. The number I had given to Forum and Ren's school registrar and no one else. I did not recognize the number. I answered anyway. A girl's voice, older than I expected, unsteady in a way that sounded like someone who had been working up to a phone call for several days and was now committed to seeing it through regardless of the cost. Dad, it is Ren. I did not say anything for a moment, just adjusted to the fact of her voice. Older, yes, but still recognizably hers. The last time I had heard it she was 11, asking me through a closed door if I was coming down for dinner. She was 15 now. 4 years is a long time at that age. Ren. She took a breath. The unsteadiness in her voice was not going anywhere. She was pushing through it, not past it. I need to tell you something. Mom died last week. I stood still in the kitchen. Ovarian cancer, she said. They diagnosed it 8 months ago. It moved fast. I asked where she was staying. She said her aunt's, Evelyn's sister Petra. I knew Petra peripherally. Steady woman, sensible household. I registered that as the best available outcome and moved on. Ren said that is not the only reason I called. She told me about the box. It had started as a shoe box, apparently, then a larger storage box as the years added up. Beside Evelyn's bed for the last 4 years, letters, all of them sealed, all addressed to me, care of Forum's office. Ren had gone through them after. She counted 203. I did not respond to that. I waited. Then Ren said Evelyn had left a voice recording on her phone. 3 weeks before she died, when she was still well enough to be deliberate about it, she asked if she could play it. I said yes. There was a brief pause, the sound of Ren holding the phone toward a speaker, and then Evelyn's voice came through the line. It was thin. The kind of thin that comes from sustained illness, not just one bad day. Whatever performance she might have once been capable of was completely gone. What was left was just the voice of someone with a specific thing to say and a limited amount of time to say it. She said she was not recording it to ask for forgiveness. She knew she was past that. She recorded it because she needed Cassian to understand what he had actually been up against. Not to diminish her own responsibility, but because the full truth mattered and she had not told it. Then she told it. Lucien had been pursuing her since before the wedding. Not casually, persistently, strategically over years. She had resisted for a long time. What wore her down was not Lucien. It was his parents. My parents. They had known what Lucien was doing, not suspected. Known. My mother had intervened twice when Evelyn had come close to telling me directly not to stop Lucien. To stop Evelyn. She had been methodical about it, creating distance between Evelyn and anyone outside the family who might have supported her going to me, framing every potential moment of honesty as a catastrophic threat to the family's stability, making Evelyn feel that telling me the truth would cost her everything while staying silent was the only survivable option. By the time the pregnancy happened, Evelyn had been surrounded by that pressure long enough that her own judgment had eroded. She said that plainly, no excuses dressed up as explanations. She acknowledged she had choices the entire time. She made the wrong one. She was not asking him to reframe that. She just needed him to know that he had been betrayed by more people in more coordinated ways than he had ever had the full picture of. The recording ended. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The information settled into its correct position alongside everything I already knew. It explained the tone of my mother's voice on that first phone call, the speed of it, the damage control register. It explained the years of coverage, the framing. It did not change my conclusions. It just completed the picture. Ren came back on the line. Her voice was still shaking. She waited. I said, "Thank you for calling, Ren." A pause. Then, "Dad, good night." I hung up. I set the phone on the counter. I stood there for a while, not processing, not feeling, just occupying the room until the moment passed. Then I picked the phone back up and called Forum. He answered on the second ring. I told him there was a box of letters coming. I needed him to arrange climate-controlled archival storage. Sealed, not destroyed. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "Do you want them sent to you first?" "No." I hung up with Forum and put the phone face down on the counter. I did not go to bed immediately. I stood in the kitchen for a while, then moved to the back porch and sat in the dark looking out toward the water. It was a clear night, cold enough to feel deliberate about it. I let myself think through everything Evelyn's recording had actually told me, not emotionally, just structurally. My parents' involvement was new information. The coordination of it, the years of managed pressure, the 2 specific moments where my mother had intervened to keep Evelyn silent. That was a level of orchestration I had not fully mapped at the time. I had suspected something from that first phone call, from the speed of my mother's damage control response. But suspicion and confirmation are different things. It landed with appropriate weight. I sat with it for a while and gave it the consideration it deserved. Then I thought about what had changed. Evelyn had 203 separate opportunities to tell me the truth. Some of those were hard. I understand that now more completely than I did before. My parents made it harder than it needed to be. The pressure was real and sustained, and I do not dismiss that. But pressure is not the same as impossibility. She had choices the entire time. She said so herself, and she made the wrong ones repeatedly across years. My parents had their own accounting to settle for what they had done, but Evelyn's choices were Evelyn's. None of the new information changed my conclusions. It completed the picture. That is different. I thought about the letters. 203 of them. 4 years of consistent effort, every birthday and holiday and anniversary, every occasion that might have felt like an opening. She wrote to a P.O. box address with no certainty that the letters were even being received. I thought about what kind of sustained hoping that requires. And I recognized it for what it was. Not love rebuilt, but a waiting room she had constructed for herself. A place to put the hope that I might eventually come back and give her what she needed. I was not going to read them. Not from cruelty. I want to be precise about that distinction. From accuracy, reading them would mean pulling a thread that I had deliberately, carefully, correctly cut. I already had the ending. Evelyn's own voice had delivered it. I did not need 203 variations of the chapters. The next morning I called Forum and confirmed the storage arrangement. He handled it without further questions. That is why I've kept him for 10 years. I instructed him separately to set up a direct financial account for Ren, structured, consistent, routed to her personally rather than through anyone else's household. She had my number. If she needed something she could not reach, she could call. That was the extent of what I arranged. It was enough. I did not attend the funeral. I did not travel. There was nothing there that required my presence. The people gathered in that room were people who had in various configurations and degrees participated in the dismantling of my life. I had nothing to offer and nothing to collect. Over the following months the remaining details arrived through forum and the occasional brief update from Ren, who called twice. Short calls, factual, neither of us reaching for more than that. Drakehold Construction was sold, what remained of it at a significant loss. My parents moved to a smaller house in a quieter suburb. My father's health had become unreliable. My mother attempted contact through Ren, at some point sent a message asking Ren to pass along that she would like to speak with me. Ren delivered it verbatim the way I had raised her to be straight about things. I told Ren I had received it. I did not respond to my mother. Lucienne was working a mid-level project coordination role at a construction firm on the other side of the country. Not destroyed, not thriving, just reduced, compressed down to the scale his actual capabilities had always justified. A man who had spent his entire career borrowing someone else's gravity and was now operating without it. He had a repayment arrangement that would follow him for years. He had a new partner. He had a son he largely was not present for. Rowena, I was pleased to learn through a mutual acquaintance, had moved cities and built a professional reputation entirely her own. She had apparently never looked back. Good, she deserved that. I thought about Mercy sometimes. What it actually costs, where the supply ends. Evelyn spent 4 years in that waiting room she built, waiting for a knock on the door that meant I was willing to extend something I no longer had available. I could have given her closure. I chose not to. I do not carry that choice with shame or satisfaction. I carry it the way you carry any correct decision made under difficult conditions, cleanly, without revisiting it. The last thing she ever learned was that some betrayals are so deep and so sustained and so deliberately constructed that mercy simply runs out. Not because the person wronged is incapable of it, but because it was spent, drawn down slowly across years by people who counted on it being there. She died waiting for something that no longer existed. I went back inside. I started dinner. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Wishing you all the best, stay healthy, and take care.